Hi there. Welcome to another episode of All Things Delivered. I'm Mary Thingvall, Community Manager here at SparkPost, and All Things Delivered is an opportunity for us to connect with you, our community. You can talk to us live, use the hashtag SparkPostLive on Twitter, or join us in our community Slack in the SparkPost Live channel. Today, we're talking a little bit about DevOps. If you've read our blog, you've likely seen some posts around our DevOps journey or some of the technical stack that we have. I'm happy to say that today I have with me some of the people who make those changes happen and who are responsible for keeping things up and running on a day-to-day basis. How about you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Chris McFadden. I'm the VP for Engineering and Operations here at SparkPost. I've been here for several years and been involved with our journey from an on-premises company to being the leader in the cloud.
I'm Jeremy Blosser. I'm the Principal Operations Engineer at SparkPost, working with our Cloud Operations team. Started around 3 years ago as we started to make the migration from being an on-premises company to a cloud company. Started out as a senior cloud engineer in that department, and these days I'm responsible for technical leadership of our cloud infrastructure, architecture, networking, et cetera, and reviewing work of the other engineers and keeping us, on a technical page moving forward.
And I'm John Peacock. I've been with the company since before there was a company. I was hired by the previous company, so I predate both Message Systems and SparkPost. I was hired as a core developer. I bounced around to various departments, QA, support engineering, whatnot. My current title this week is Lead Software Engineer SRE, and I'm in many ways I did the first proof of concept of our current deployment model, and in many ways I'm the architect of that as well.
Very cool. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining me today. So first of all, let's establish a little bit of what DevOps means to us here at SparkPost. Chris, you want to give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, sure. So DevOps can be a bit of a loaded term and is used widely. But it's certainly something that people understand. Generally what it's talking about. I think for us here at SparkPost, one of the major aspects for DevOps has really been our transition from Message Systems, which was an on-premises software company. We did releases about a couple times a year, perhaps. And we had a very much a waterfall approach to doing software development and getting the software to customers. So now, go forward a few years, now we're SparkPost, and we're doing deployments several times a day. And so the release cadence has really increased a lot. So we really had to make a lot of changes to how our teams are structured, to our culture around engineering and our tooling. And so that's, I think that's really been the change for us. So for us, DevOps is the things that we've done, and the practices we've got in place now to help us with delivering software, very frequently to customers and getting things out there very quickly. And that breaking down a lot of the silos that we've had historically, between, say, development and QA and operations, and over time, really consolidating them so that we now have application development teams that develop the core software, and we have our site reliability engineering team, which includes a cross-functional group of developers and operations engineers, and really people working very collaboratively to deploy software, to monitor the software, to support the customer experience in production. And the other guys can certainly go into a lot more detail on that, but that's that change now. As we've really made a lot of progress and continue to make changes and improvements, again, to continue to increase our speed in getting things out to production.
That's awesome. Thanks. One of the things that I know DevOps is expected to be, whether or not it actually is a whole other conversation, but it's expected to be this, breaking down of the walls between developers and ops teams. How does that work at SparkPost? How do our developers and our ops teams work together on a daily basis?
Yeah, so there's really kind of two parts to that answer. First of all, as Chris mentioned, our SRE team is cross-functional. So we've got people who came up through systems administration and operations engineering. We've got architects, we've got developers, we've got people who have their background in packaging and provisioning. We have network engineers. We have people that came in through our frontline support team. So we're just working together every day, reviewing each other's changes in code, working through designs together. We do a lot of cross-training, of course, taking people who had a background in development, working with a network engineer, for example, on a project and vice versa, so they can learn how to support our entire stack. To be that whole SRE team, and then then it becomes a question of how does that SRE team work with the dedicated core application development teams, and we do that as well. Whether it's people have been known to temporarily go from one team to another to work with them for a while to solve specific problems. We have, of course, meetings. We're in Slack all day together working through things. Sometimes long-term projects might move into a core development team for a while before SRE sees it again, or vice versa, but it's not really about the silos as much as it is the expertise. Definitely the emphasis is on collaboration. One specific example is probably we have a lot of shared responsibility around how our deployments work. We have a continuous integration model, multiple deployments a day, but we still follow a change management process just to make sure we have the right parties involved as far as transparency and sign off and buy-in on what's happening in the environment. So, our CM process goes through our product team and our support team and our application team and our SRE team, and everybody's got a different role there. The application team's role is to make sure, this change is the code changes are the right ones to do what the product team wanted to see happen. And the RE team's responsibility is to make sure, right, that the changes that are being made, that the implementation plan and the rollback plan are sound, are understood, that everything's been reviewed as it needs to be, so that we can keep moving features forward for our customers without introducing defects along the way, and staying agile. We also have a shared on-call process. So we have the RE team has the hot potato on-call. We're the ones that get paged if our monitoring notices something is not working correctly. But we immediately, that on-call person's job is not to fix the problem. It's to bring all the eyes to the problem that need to be there. But we have rotations in place as well for those dedicated even development teams, support teams, et cetera, so that we can grab the right people, get them on a war room call, and fix whatever's broken when something does happen.
And to touch on something we'll get into a little bit later, the tool we're using for our deployment model is called Ansible, and the way that's structured is that the SRE team basically has provided a functional framework for deployments, and then the actual application engineers are frequently the ones who are writing the scripts that actually push out the traffic. We're also heavily leveraging our continuous integration process so that we will, just based on a commit, deploy it to a testing environment, and then after that's been validated and merged to the trunk, that'll get deployed to production automatically. So we're definitely leveraging the tools as much as we can to make sure that we get everything going. And we spent a lot of time working on making sure that the rollback process is transparent. So if there's a problem, we can go back very quickly. We just
right,
don't
because
like,
everything's documented and everyone knows what's going on and everyone's been involved.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
There's the production deployments are just pushing a button. Same thing with the rollback, just pushing a button.
That's awesome. So, John, you alluded to this a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more about our technical operations stack. We mentioned in one of our blog posts that I'll link to below that we're on our 3rd generation of the stack, and we're obviously moving quickly and using the best tools for what we're needing to do. Can you walk me a little bit through where we are now and how we got here, Jeremy?
Yeah, sure. So It's funny, we are moving pretty quickly. I went back and reviewed that blog post, which I wrote the original version of that, and noticing some of the things in there that we've already moved beyond. But first generation of our cloud offering, the goal was really to take our at that time 15-year on-premises Momentum MTA product and make it available in the cloud, kind of with a focus on a public cloud offering for developers, right, who wouldn't normally be able to afford that kind of software themselves. So the first job was really just to get it installed in the cloud, kind of in a standard deployment, and get it usable to people. Of course, that attracted a lot of interest. And as we moved into our second generation, the focus was really on starting to partition things into tiers, get better VPC segregation in place, network segregation in a more generic sense in Amazon's cloud. And the focus became kind of on a managed cloud experience for more enterprise customers. As that's continued to grow and we continue to iterate, we see you see the points where that's not going to scale forever, and so we start moving back into a model that's more cloud appropriate. It's more fully multi-tier. Moving into microservices, taking application components that were built for on-premises years ago and either replacing them. One example there would be that the on-premises version has used RabbitMQ for a lot of years for certain things, and we're now in the cloud. We moved away from that, and we're using SQS instead, moving it off of disk into Amazon's backend. We've also continued to evolve the specific tools we're using as that evolution has happened. So starting out our initial provisioning for just getting instances running, getting networks in place, getting routes between them, it was basically using shell scripts that were calling Amazon's API and CLI, which is very robust and will do basically everything you need it to do, but can be hard to manage at scale, just the human experience of it, the administrative experience of the complexity of it. So, eventually moved to migrating to Terraform's tool for provisioning. And I think that's what we were using when we wrote that blog post. It's a great tool. They are really, really aggressive at their upgrade cycle and their new feature cycle, and we weren't keeping up with it as well as we wanted to, which was causing some additional complexity. So we have since then migrated into using Amazon's CloudFormation tools a lot more directly, where you just define a template using AWS object types and names and push a button and it expands. And then if you want to add more later, you just extend the template. Another example that's kind of in progress right now is, of course, we're a mail company, and mail is unique in cloud offerings or in any software offerings in that we're not just publishing a domain name and saying, come get stuff from us, come get video from us, come get books from us, come get retail from us. We're pushing content for people because we're a mail provider. So IP management is critical there. IP reputation management is critical there. We use a lot of IPs up more than other types of business do. So in our on-premises version, we had a virtual IP model where IPs can migrate between nodes in a platform cluster as they need to. That doesn't really map one-to-one with a cloud environment where we're not directly in control of the network. It's abstracted from us. So, early days, we've used Amazon's elastic load balancers first, and now the new application load balancer model to handle a lot of that for us. But it's been useful, but it's not quite where we want to be as a mail company. So we're continuing to look at moving that forward. I think a next step there is going to be getting back to sort of a VIP model, virtual IP model, but one that is, works with Amazon's tools and uses their API to move IPs around as needed. That stuff's, yet to come, and it'll be transparent to customers, but it's just a question of efficient use of our IPs. So those are some of the things that we've done, some of the places that we are and how we got there.
Right. And the part that I love about this is that it seems very clear that every change we make, every step that we're making is done for a very specific reason. It's done to increase our productivity. It's done to increase the ability of SparkPost to better serve our customers.
Absolutely.
Cool.
We've got to scale. We've got to stay efficient. We've got to deliver. A big part of our value add is the time from their injection to message delivery, and we've got to continue to grow and service more and more customers while making that delay shorter as we go.
Exactly. All right, let's talk a little bit specifically now about configuration management and provisioning. What lessons have we learned that may be helpful to other folks? John?
So initially, we started out when we were doing the on-prem and the cloud model using a tool called Puppet, which is really, really good at maintaining state, but it made it very difficult for us to be agile. And so we moved to another tool called Ansible, which is very good at transforming state. And as part of that move, we looked at how we were actually modeling the configuration, because there's always this dramatic tension between having very narrow config pieces that only do one thing and having this huge data file that you have to keep maintaining. So one of the things that Ansible provides for us is something called a role, which is a way of sort of encapsulating both configuration data and installation rules. And so one of the things we've evolved as we've gone along is making enough roles that we can stay focused but still remain flexible. So when Jeremy was talking about the microservices, all of our roles are designed at the microservice level. So whether it's installed on one instance or on a dozen instances, the underlying configuration system is the same. It's just where the target goes. And so one of the things that we found over the last couple of years is that it's really useful to leverage an additive config model so that we have a bunch, but not too many, configuration files that each have a fairly tightly focused set of things in it, binding groups, things like that. And at the same time, we don't want to have these huge shared files that we wind up updating little pieces of, because then it's very hard for you to actually track down, well, what changed this particular line. And so the goal is to partition the config enough to have a file that makes sense, that all of the pieces that this file satisfies are in that file, so you can just look at that one file and you can see what you're doing. So it helps a lot that a lot of the software we're using provides us with the ability to have include files. So we can have one file that includes another file that includes another file, and the running config may be large, but the individual feature config is small and easy to understand. And that's really why we're able to have the application developers manage the vast majority of the configuration bits, because they know that code really well. They can use, their knowledge to write a very tight little piece of, we turn this on, we test it, it doesn't work, let's roll it back. And that's one of the things that Ansible provides us, is we have a very good stateful flow control. We can say, let's do this, let's do that, let's do that. Well, all of these things require us to reload the config or to restart the system. And it just naturally flows out of the way the config is written, that the right way of turning this particular feature on just happens.
That's awesome. Very cool. Makes it a little more magical.
Yeah, it is a little magical.
Awesome. Well, pivoting a little bit, and this is one of my favorite questions to ask various people that are on our teams, but what does your typical day look like? Or does that term actually apply to you?
Sure, I can take that first. So for me, since I would say for my typical day, I spend a lot of time doing product and architecture planning, working with folks like Jeremy and John, other leads on some of the other development teams, working with our product team, working with our support team, really figure out how we can improve the product, how we're rolling out new features, make sure we're looking at following like a minimum viable product approach, getting things out there tested, and then start iterating on them. So that's a lot of what I do. Also, obviously, we have a fairly large team, so just helping the team as far as making things easier for them, making sure everyone's happy, planning hackathons or helping out with some of the other activities for the team. And then Also, we have a lot of operational issues that we focus on. We really pride ourselves on having a really stable service, really good performance. So, operational issues really get a lot of priority, and we make sure we understand, what's going on, how we improve those. We follow very rigid, like root cause analysis process, and so we attribute that to a lot of our success in terms of keeping our availability as high as it is. So yeah, and then when I have some free time, I love spending time in our community Slack channel, talking to some of our users and getting feedback from them.
Cool. Jeremy, what about you?
Yeah, so it applies to me, I guess, typical day in the life. A lot of my kind of, hands-on keyboard work is implementing those generational changes I talked about earlier. So the actual work to migrate, parts of our infrastructure from second generation infrastructure to third generation, whatever that migration looks like, whether it's redeploying or something else. Chris mentioned operational issues. I'm very involved whenever those come up. So debugging what's going on, helping us triage things, determine if this is what severity this is, getting the right people looking at it, as well as the RCA process, helping us ask the right questions for the areas I'm responsible for, structures and network stuff. I also do a lot of the cross training and working with the SRE team, the juniors and seniors to help them unblock, help debug their stuff before things become an operational issue. Of course, we don't, we want to cut all that off before we get there. Participating in design discussions, reviewing designs that are coming out of the rest of the team. The CM process we talked about earlier, I do a lot of the reviews for the SRE components there, reviewing that things that are going through the pipeline have a good reviewed, signed off on implementation plan, as well as a solid rollback plan that's push button. And then of course, always R&D, always looking at extending our architecture for whatever the next generation is going to be. Right now, the big things we have on the horizon there are looking at multi-region options in AWS. We're in several regions right now, but we want to be more aggressively kind of active modeled there. Versus some of what we have now, and then on the horizon as well, even looking at going multi-vendor in the cloud, so that if the impossible happens and AWS has an issue, our customers are still be able to send their email.
Good stuff. And John, you wrap us up. What's your typical day look like?
So I frequently describe myself as a recovering sysadmin. So even though I've been mostly a developer for quite a long time, I sort of have sysadmin tendencies. So there is no typical day for me. Some days I'll be fighting fires all day and I'll be involved in the trenches just like Jeremy is. Some days I'll be working on, we maintain our own packages because it gives us better control over what versions of which software we're running. So I'm very involved with that. And I also tend to be trying to always think ahead. Well, what are we going to need 6 months, a year from now in terms of the design of our config system so that it's scalable? So I'm always looking at that sort of in the back of my head.
Yeah, so all three of you spend a lot of time both on your keyboards, but also doing research and looking ahead. And that, I think that shows when we start talking about, what generation are we on of our tech stack and how quickly we're moving to different things. It makes a big difference. Cool. One last question for you all. What is your favorite part of your job?
So I think there's two things that I like the most. One is I love getting feedback from, whether it be in community Slack or on Twitter, seeing some of the good feedback from customers about how much they really like the service and how much it's really helped them. I think that really helps put things into perspective around how important our service is and how important it is to make sure it's a really good product, really reliable. And then beyond that, I really love seeing the daily progress we make with and looking back and seeing how far we've come and all the progress that the team has made. I work with some really great people, and so it's really enjoyable, seeing seeing when there's problems, how we work through them, and work past them and continue to make things better.
So for me, it's probably solving interesting problems. I love, that Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. To break that down a little bit, solving problems is, to me, that, you want to solve the problem, do no more, no less. So sometimes there's a tendency, especially among sysadmins, to want to solve the problem and then some. We get caught up in bike shedding, we get caught up in all kinds of things. I like to see us fix the real problem and move on to the next thing that needs our attention, and we can come back and iterate later if there are more edges we need to smooth down. And then, of course, the interesting part, nobody really wants to solve boring problems, or if they do, they don't want to do it for very long. The good news is that email remains very interesting to me. It definitely is unique in a service delivery. Here we're doing things that routinely surprise AWS. They've been great at helping us solve those problems, but we often ask questions and they kind of say, why would anybody want to do that? Or, 640K ought to be enough there for anybody. And we're like, no, this is email. And then it makes sense to them. We've got a great team there, and they help us get to the bottom of it and figure out how to make their service work for us. But yeah, there's, I don't see running out of interesting problems anytime soon in the email space or the virtualization space or the cloud operations space. And about the time we do, I'm sure the whole industry will be ready to move on from the cloud to whatever comes after that.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, and so Jeremy basically just stole my thunder. That's pretty much what I would say. It's the solving the problems that because I mean, I'm an engineer by training in college, so I just get really a lot of satisfaction from solving a problem. The gnarlier, the better. And I mean, to echo what Chris said as well. We have a great team. There's some really good people, and we have lots of people remote, but it doesn't make any difference because we're all just in each other's face on Slack all the time, dealing with problems. And we try and help anybody who needs help. And I think that's really the satisfying part. And I've seen the company grow quite a lot since I was hired. And that's very satisfying.
Very cool. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it. And we'll have another episode of All Things Delivered coming at you soon. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Thanks.